The coastal air hung heavy with salt and secrets as Officer Mason Reed guided his patrol car through the cobblestone streets of Pinewood Harbor, Maine. His partner, a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rocky, sat alert in the specially designed rear compartment, dark eyes scanning the passing scenery with professional interest. The morning fog was just beginning to lift, revealing the town's distinctive blend of weathered fishing piers and carefully preserved colonial architecture. Mason had transferred to this sleepy seaside town 3 years ago after a stint with the Boston Police Department. The pace was slower here. The crimes, typically minor vandalism, public intoxication, the occasional tourist dispute, but he found the rhythm suited him. Rocky, trained in tracking narcotics detection and search and rescue, was often overqualified for their daily duties, but the canine's instincts had proven invaluable on multiple occasions. "Another quiet morning, boy," Mason commented, glancing at Rocky in the rearview mirror. The shepherd's ears perked up at the sound of his voice, acknowledging the connection that had grown between them through countless patrols and training sessions. They were making their usual round through Harborview Park, a picturesque stretch of manicured lawns and winding paths overlooking the Atlantic. Summer tourists had departed weeks ago, leaving the park nearly deserted in the crisp October morning. Mason liked it this way, the town reclaimed by its permanent residents, the authentic Pinewood Harbor emerging from beneath its seasonal veneer. Rocky's behavior changed abruptly as they passed a cluster of benches near the eastern entrance. The shepherd's posture stiffened, his attention locked on something outside the vehicle. A low whine escaped his throat, the sound he made when he detected something requiring investigation. "What is it, boy?" Mason pulled the patrol car to the curb and observed his partner's behavior. Rocky wasn't displaying his narcotics alert or his aggressive posture for potential threats. This was something different, a mixture of concern and urgency Mason had rarely seen. After securing the area visually, Mason released Rocky from the vehicle. The shepherd immediately took the lead, pulling his handler toward what appeared to be an abandoned baby stroller near a park bench. The stroller was navy blue with white trim, modern and expensive looking, completely out of place in the empty park. Rocky circled the stroller once, then sat beside it, looking up at Mason with an expectant gaze. This was his passive alert, indicating he'd found something significant but not necessarily dangerous. "Good boy," Mason murmured, approaching cautiously. His hand instinctively moved toward his service weapon, years of training preparing him for anything. The sight inside the stroller sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system. A baby, perhaps 3 or 4 months old, slept peacefully among carefully arranged blankets. The infant's cheeks were rosy, breathing steady and unlabored, wrapped snugly in a blue blanket embroidered with sailing ships. Mason immediately checked for signs of distress or neglect, but found none. The baby appeared well cared for, clean and healthy. "Central, this is Officer Reed." He spoke into his radio, keeping his voice calm, despite the surge of questions flooding his mind. "I've located an abandoned infant at Harborview Park East entrance. Child appears healthy and unharmed, requesting immediate assistance in Child Protective Services." While awaiting backup, Mason carefully examined the scene, conscious not to disturb potential evidence. Rocky remained unusually focused on the baby, occasionally nudging the edge of the stroller with his nose. The dog's behavior puzzled Mason. Rocky was trained to find people not to display such persistent interest after the discovery. "What's got you so worked up, boy?" Mason wondered aloud, conducting a methodical search of the stroller. In a zippered compartment, he found a diaper bag containing formula diapers, several changes of clothes, and a folded piece of paper. With gloved hands, he carefully unfolded the note. Written in hurried but elegant handwriting was a message that transformed the abandoned baby case into something far more complex. Or, "Please protect my son Noah. They're after us. I can't explain everything, but know that you're his only hope now. Don't trust anyone. Look for the answers in the pendant he wears. I'll find a way to contact you when it's safe." Mason gently checked the sleeping infant and discovered a silver pendant hanging from a thin chain around the baby's neck. The pendant was intricately crafted, bearing a symbol that resembled an elaborate compass rose, with unusual markings etched around the edges. Something about the design triggered a faint recognition in Mason's memory, though he couldn't immediately place where he might have seen it before. Lieutenant Victoria Reeves arrived first, her department SUV pulling alongside Mason's patrol car. In her mid-40s, with prematurely silver hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing, Reeves had a reputation for by-the-book professionalism that had earned her both respect and resentment within the department. "What have we got?" she asked, approaching with efficient strides. "Abandoned infant, approximately 3 to 4 months old male," Mason reported, handing her the note. "Found with this note and wearing this pendant." He pointed to the silver ornament still around the baby's neck. Reeves read the note quickly, her expression revealing nothing, though Mason thought he detected a momentary tightening around her eyes. She examined the pendant without touching it, then straightened with decision. "I'll take it from here. Reed Child Protective Services is en route. You can continue your patrol." Mason hesitated, watching Rocky's continued alertness. "Lieutenant Rocky seems particularly concerned about the situation. I'd like to follow up and ensure the child is safely processed." "That won't be necessary, officer," Reeves replied, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "This is a standard abandoned baby case. We'll follow protocol." Before Mason could respond, his personal phone vibrated. The screen displayed unknown number, unusual as most calls came through the department system. "Officer Reed speaking," he answered, stepping slightly away from Reeves. "The baby isn't the target, it's what he carries." A distorted voice stated without preamble, "Be careful who you trust. Look into the Harbor View incident of 1997. "Who is this?" Mason demanded, but the line had already gone dead. When he turned back, Reeves was watching him with undisguised suspicion. "Who was that?" "Wrong number." Mason lied, uncertain why he felt compelled to withhold information. "Someone looking for animal control." The Child Protective Services worker, a heavy-set woman named Gloria Winters, arrived moments later. As she prepared to take custody of the still-sleeping Noah Mason, surreptitiously photographed the pendant with his phone. Where will he be taken?" Mason asked Gloria, ignoring Reeves' impatient glance. "Pinewood Harbor Family Services for initial assessment and placement." Gloria replied, expertly transferring the baby to a portable carrier. "Standard procedure until we can locate any family members." Mason noticed Reeves speaking quietly into her phone, her back turned to the group. Something in her posture suggested urgency and secrecy. Rocky remained unusually vigilant, pressing against Mason's leg as if to communicate some unspoken warning. Mainly, buried secrets. Throughout the remainder of his shift, Mason found his thoughts returning to the abandoned baby and the mysterious pendant. The anonymous caller's reference to the Harbor View incident of 1997 nagged at him. He was only 12 years old in 1997, living hundreds of miles away in Pennsylvania. But something about the reference felt strangely familiar. Back at the station, Mason used his break to review security footage from cameras near the park. The footage showed a silver sedan stopping briefly near the park entrance at 6:17 a.m., approximately 40 minutes before Mason and Rocky discovered the stroller. A hooded figure quickly placed the stroller on the sidewalk before returning to the vehicle. The car then drove north toward the affluent Cliffside neighborhood, rather than the more transient areas of town where abandoned baby cases typically originated. "Reed, the deputy chief wants to see you." Officer Danielle Chen called from across the room. Mason logged out of the system and made his way to Deputy Chief Anderson's office, Rocky, following dutifully behind. Deputy Chief Lawrence Anderson was a career officer who had risen through the ranks of the Pinewood Harbor Police Department over 30 years. With a reputation for political savvy and careful management of the department's public image, Anderson was widely expected to become chief when the current one retired next year. "Officer Reed." Anderson greeted him from behind an immaculate desk. "Lieutenant Reeves briefed me on this morning's discovery. Abandoned baby, correct? Adromine Rana." "Yes, sir. Male infant, approximately 3 to 4 months old, left in a stroller at Harborview Park." Anderson nodded slowly. I'm reassigning this case to our Family Services Division. You've got enough on your plate with regular patrol duties. Key. Mason felt a surge of resistance. With respect, sir, there are unusual circumstances surrounding this abandonment. The note left with the baby suggested potential danger, and the infant was wearing a distinctive pendant that might help identify the family. A pendant. Anderson's interest seemed to sharpen. What kind of pendant? Silver, sir, with an unusual symbol, something like an ornate compass rose. Anderson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I'll make sure that detail is passed along to Family Services, but as I said, you're to focus on your regular duties. That's an order, not a suggestion. Officer Reed, Yes, sir, Mason replied, recognizing the tone that brooked no argument. As he left the office, Mason noticed Detective Carlos Martinez watching him from across the squad room. The veteran detective, known for his meticulous approach to investigations and encyclopedic knowledge of the department's history, motioned subtly for Mason to follow him to the break room. Be careful, Reed, Martinez whispered once they were alone. That baby you found, there's more to it than appears. People are nervous upstairs. What do you know about the Harborview incident of 1997? Mason asked quietly. Martinez's face paled. Where did you hear about that? Anonymous tip connected to the baby somehow. The detective glanced toward the door, ensuring they were still alone. Listen to me, he said, his voice barely audible. That case was officially shelved, but it never really closed. Your father was involved, deeply involved. Mason felt as if the floor had tilted beneath him. My father, Simon Reed. He wasn't even on the force here in '97. He was with Pittsburgh PD. Martinez looked genuinely surprised. Not Simon Reed, I'm talking about your biological father, James Hayes. He was a detective here from '91 to '98. The words struck Mason like a physical blow. He'd been adopted by the Reeds as a toddler after his biological parents died in what he'd always been told was a car accident. His adoptive parents had been loving and open about his adoption, but information about his biological family had been scarce, just names on a birth certificate and a few photographs of a young couple he couldn't remember. There must be some mistake. Mason managed to say, my biological father died when I was 2 years old. Martinez studied him intently. That's what they told you. Interesting. He glanced at his watch. I can't talk now. Meet me tonight at the Rusty Anchor, 10 p.m. Come alone except for Rocky Dogs or good judges of character. That evening, Mason found himself searching online for information about Harborview Incident 1997, Pinewood Harbor. The results were sparse, just a few archived newspaper articles mentioning a police operation at Harborview Park that resulted in no arrests and is under internal review. No details, no follow-up stories, as if the incident had been deliberately minimized in public records. His search for information about James Hayes was more revealing. Multiple articles confirmed that James Hayes had indeed been a detective with the Pinewood Harbor Police Department from 1991 until his death in 1998, not 1997, as Mason had always believed. Hayes had received several commendations for his work on organized crime cases, particularly those involving coastal smuggling operations. A police department photograph from 1996 showed Detective James Hayes standing alongside several other officers, including a much younger version of Detective Martinez. The resemblance between Mason and his biological father was striking. The same jawline, the same set of the eyes. It was like looking at a preview of his own face in 20 years. Most surprisingly, an obituary dated March 1998 stated that Detective James Hayes died after a brief illness, survived by his wife Catherine, who had passed away 6 months earlier, and their son Mason, aged 2. There was no mention of a car accident. Everything Mason had been told about his biological parents' deaths appeared to be a fabrication. Rocky's sudden alertness drew Mason's attention away from his laptop. The shepherd was staring intently at the apartment door, head cocked slightly to one side, listening. A moment later, Mason heard it too. Footsteps in the hallway that stopped directly outside his door. Drawing his off-duty weapon, Mason motioned for Rocky to hold position. The footsteps lingered for several seconds, then continued down the hallway. Mason moved silently to the peephole, catching a glimpse of a tall figure in a dark coat, turning the corner toward the stairwell. "Come on, Rocky," Mason whispered quickly, attaching the shepherd's lead. "Let's see who our visitor is." They slipped out of the apartment, quietly following at a distance, as the figure exited the building and headed toward the harbor. The mysterious visitor, a man judging by his built-in gait, moved purposefully through the nearly deserted streets, finally stopping at the edge of the old commercial pier, now largely abandoned after the construction of the modern marina a decade ago. From behind a stack of weathered crates, Mason watched as the man placed something beneath a loose board, then departed quickly in the opposite direction. After ensuring the area was clear, Mason approached the hiding spot. Rocky sniffed eagerly as Mason pried up the loose board, revealing a waterproof envelope secured with duct tape. Inside was a USB drive and a faded photograph that made Mason's breath catch in his throat. The photo showed a group of officers in casual clothes at what appeared to be a department barbecue. In the center stood James Hayes, with his arm around a woman Mason recognized from the few photos he had of his biological mother, Catherine. They were smiling, relaxed, surrounded by colleagues. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "The circle remains unbroken. JH plus KH Summer 97. Back in his apartment, Mason examined the USB drive cautiously. His laptop warned of potential security risks, but he bypassed the warnings and opened the single file that contained a heavily redacted police report about the Harborview incident, dated June 17, 1997. Most of the document was blacked out, but a few key phrases remained visible. Unauthorized intelligence operation, missing evidence, and internal compromise. At the bottom, a handwritten note had been scanned with the document, JH. "If you're reading this, they found her. The pendant is the key trust, only those who know the full story." Mason's phone rang, startling him. Unknown number displayed on the screen, the same as the earlier caller. "Officer Reed," a woman's voice said without preamble. "Don't try to trace this call. I'm a friend of Noah's mother. Meet me at the lighthouse tomorrow at dawn. Come alone except for your dog. He seems to have good instincts." The call ended before Mason could respond. The caller's knowledge of Rocky's reaction to the stroller was troubling. Someone had been watching at Harborview Park, someone other than the surveillance cameras he checked. Surveyor, the lighthouse meeting. The Pinewood Harbor lighthouse stood on a rocky promontory at the northern edge of town, its white and red stripes weathered by decades of salt and wind. Mason arrived before sunrise, parking his personal vehicle. A rugged Jeep Wrangler behind the old keeper's cottage, now repurposed as a maritime museum. Rocky's ears perked up as a figure emerged from the morning mist. A woman in her mid-30s approached cautiously, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. She wore hiking boots, jeans, and a weatherproof jacket with multiple pockets, practical clothing that suggested readiness for quick movement. "Officer Reed," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "My name is Rachel Chen. I worked with Emily Parker, Noah's mother. Worked with her, where?" Mason asked, maintaining a safe distance, one hand resting lightly on Rocky's harness. "We were both research analysts at North Star Technologies officially," Rachel explained. "In reality, we were investigating a network of corruption that extends throughout Pinewood Harbor's power structure, reaching all the way to your police department, Kanoni Amon." "Why would Emily abandon her baby? What's she mixed up in?" "Emily didn't abandon Noah," Rachel said firmly. "She was trying to protect him. The pendant around his neck contains something that powerful people want very badly. What's on it? In merely evidence," Rachel replied simply, "of a conspiracy that's been operating in Pinewood Harbor for decades. Emily uncovered it accidentally while working on a data security project for the town's digital archives. The pendant contains a sophisticated microchip embedded in the metal itself, and this connects to my father somehow, to James Hayes." Rachel's expression shifted to surprise. "You know about your biological father's involvement? I wasn't sure how much you'd been told." "Almost nothing," Mason admitted. "I was raised by adoptive parents who told me my biological parents died in a car accident when I was 2. I only learned yesterday that my father was a detective here, and that his death might not have been what I was told. Sorry, mano. Rachel's expression softened with genuine sympathy. Your father was a good man, Officer Reed. He discovered the network's activities in 1997 and began building a case against them. But when they realized what he was doing, she trailed off. They killed him. Mason finished, a cold certainty settling in his chest. His death was made to look like natural causes, a sudden illness. Your mother died 6 months earlier under similarly suspicious circumstances. They were getting too close to the truth. Rocky suddenly tensed, growling low in his throat. Rachel froze. Someone's coming, Mason whispered, moving toward the shelter of the lighthouse door. I can't be seen with you, Rachel said urgently. Take this. She pressed a small notebook into his hand. Emily's journal, the last few entries will help you understand. Find her, Officer Reed. She trusts you because of who your father is. Before Mason could respond, Rachel disappeared around the lighthouse as the beam of a flashlight cut through the dissipating fog. Mason recognized the approaching figure immediately. Lieutenant Victoria Reeves. Reed, she called out, sounding curious rather than surprised. What are you doing here at this hour? Mason patted Rocky and stepped forward casually. Early morning training exercise. Lieutenant Rocky performs better with scent tracking at dawn when there's dew on the ground. Reeves didn't appear convinced. Quite a coincidence. I come here sometimes to clear my head before shift. She looked around the area carefully. Were you talking to someone? I thought I heard voices. Just Rocky and me. Mason lied smoothly. I sometimes talk through scenarios with him during training. Helps me focus. Reeves nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to Mason's jacket pocket, where he'd hastily tucked Emily's journal. Well, don't let me interrupt your training. I'll see you at the station later. As she walked away, Mason felt certain that her appearance was far from coincidental. Someone was monitoring his movements, which meant his conversation with Martinez at the station had likely been overheard. Back in his Jeep, Mason flipped through Emily's journal. Most entries were personal reflections and notes about her baby, details of Noah's development and her hopes for his future. But the final pages contained something entirely different. Coded references to file names and dates, along with hastily drawn replicas of the pendant symbol next to different names. Some names Mason recognized: Deputy Chief Anderson, Mayor Wilson, and most disturbingly, Captain Thomas Davis, his direct supervisor and mentor, since he joined the Pinewood Harbor Police Department. Davis had taken a special interest in Mason's career, encouraging his application, supporting his partnership with Rocky, and providing guidance through the department's often complicated politics. At the station later that morning, Mason noticed subtle changes in how his colleagues interacted with him. Detective Martinez avoided eye contact entirely. Officer Chen, usually friendly, gave him a wide berth in the locker room. Lieutenant Reeves seemed to materialize wherever Mason went, always with a plausible reason for being there. Reed got a minute. Captain Davis called from his office doorway. Unlike the others, Davis had always been straightforward with Mason, mentoring him since his academy days. Of course, sir, Mason replied, following him into the office. Davis closed the door and lowered his voice. You're stirring up trouble, son. Questions about old cases, mysterious meetings at the lighthouse, people are talking. Mason felt a chill run down his spine. Sir, with respect, how do you know about the lighthouse? Davis sighed heavily. Because I was there in '97 when it all went down. I know what that symbol means, the one on Noah's pendant. And I know your father made a difficult choice back then. What choice? Mason asked, his throat tight. To pursue the truth, no matter the cost. Davis said, his expression unreadable. He thought he could protect his family and still do the right thing. He was wrong. The captain leaned forward, his voice dropping further. Whatever you think you are uncovering, it's bigger than you realize. The question you need to ask yourself is, are you prepared to make the same choice your father did? Because the consequences won't just fall on you. Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Baby Noah moved to private facility, not authorized by CPS 24 Cliffside Road. Hurry, Ree. Mason's heart raced. The Cliffside address was in the same affluent neighborhood, where the silver sedan had headed after dropping off the stroller. "I need to go," Mason said abruptly. Captain Davis's expression shifted to resignation. "Be careful who you trust, Mason. Even the people you think you know." As Mason hurried out with Rocky, he nearly collided with Detective Martinez in the hallway. "Need backup, Reed?" Martinez asked quietly, tilting his head meaningfully toward the exit. Mason hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Maybe I do." Sonorin, the mansion on the cliff. The cliffside neighborhood justified its name and reputation. Massive homes perched on the rocky bluffs overlooking Pinewood Harbor, each property more ostentatious than the last. Mason and Martinez parked a block away from 24 Cliffside Road, a sprawling colonial-style mansion surrounded by meticulously landscaped grounds and a tall wrought iron fence. "We need a plan," Martinez said, scanning the property through compact binoculars. "We can't just walk up to the mayor's brother's house and demand to see a baby that officially should be in CPS custody." Mason watched as Rocky's attention focused on a service entrance at the rear of the property, where a catering van was parked, staff carrying trays and equipment inside. "Looks like they're having an event that could be our way in." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Risky, but it might work. What's our cover story?" "Amogi or K9 demonstration." Mason suggested. "The department does community outreach events for the upper crust all the time. We say the chief sent us as a last-minute addition to their gathering." 20 minutes later, they approached the service entrance in Martinez's unmarked car. The detective had called in a favor from the station's administrative assistant, who confirmed that Benjamin Wilson was indeed hosting a charity brunch for the Pinewood Harbor Historical Preservation Society. A harried-looking event coordinator checked her tablet when they arrived. "No K9 demonstration is on the schedule." She frowned, eyeing Rocky with apprehension. "Last-minute addition," Martinez explained smoothly. "Mayor Wilson himself requested it when he heard Officer Reed and Rocky would be available. Great PR opportunity for the department's community initiatives." The mention of the mayor seemed to ease her suspicions. "Fine, but you'll have to wait until after the main presentation. Stay near the garden area for now." Once inside the grounds, Mason and Rocky moved purposefully toward the main house, while Martinez created a diversion by engaging several security staff members in conversation about positioning for the demonstration. The mansion's first floor bustled with caterers and staff, making it easy for Mason to blend in as he navigated the opulent interior. Rocky led the way, his nose working constantly, as if he'd picked up a familiar scent. They slipped upstairs, where the dog became increasingly alert, pulling Mason toward a door at the end of a carpeted hallway lined with ancestral portraits of the Wilson family. Outside the room, Mason paused, listening. He could hear a woman's voice softly singing a lullaby. The melody was unfamiliar, but the tenderness in the voice was unmistakable. A mother comforting her child. Mason knocked gently. "Excuse me, security check," he called in an official tone. The singing stopped abruptly. After a moment, the door opened slightly to reveal a middle-aged woman in nurse's scrubs. "This area is off-limits during the event," she said firmly. Mason positioned himself so she could see his uniform. "Just doing a standard sweep, ma'am." There was a concern about one of the upstairs windows being unsecured. The woman relaxed slightly but didn't open the door wider. "All windows are secure in this room." Rocky whined softly, trying to push his nose through the gap in the door. His behavior confirmed Mason's suspicion. Noah was in that room. "Is Noah in there?" Mason asked, directly changing tactics. The nurse's expression shifted to alarm. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave before I call security." "I'm the police," Mason reminded her, showing his badge. "And I have reason to believe that an infant who should legally be in CPS custody is being kept here without authorization." A voice from behind the nurse interrupted. "It's all right, Nurse Harper. Let the officer in." The door opened fully to reveal a young woman sitting in a rocking chair. Baby Noah cradled in her arms. She appeared exhausted but relieved. "Officer Reed," she acknowledged. "I've been hoping you'd figure it out." Mason entered the room cautiously, confused by this unexpected development. "Emily Parker, Ganesher, The note in the stroller was necessary to make sure Noah ended up with someone who would ask the right questions. Emily explained, "I couldn't risk keeping him with me, but I needed to make sure the pendant would be documented in official police records." Rocky approached mother and child, sniffing gently before sitting contentedly at Emily's feet. "Your dog recognized my scent from the stroller," Emily observed with a small smile. "He's as intelligent as they said he would be." "Who's they?" Mason asked. "The same people who told me I could trust James Hayes' son." She replied, "Your father's reputation in certain circles remains significant even after all these years." Mason's phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. "Company coming, Chief Anderson just arrived with Mayor Wilson. Get out now." "We need to move," Mason told Emily urgently. "Deputy Chief Anderson is here." Emily's face paled. "We can't let him find us together. Not yet." She reached for a diaper bag and quickly gathered a few items. "There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. Nurse Harper will show you." "You're not coming with us?" Mason asked, puzzled by her calm in the face of apparent danger. "I have a role to play here, a little longer." Emily said cryptically, "Take Noah. The pendant has a false bottom. The actual data is hidden underneath the ornamental face." "I don't understand," Mason protested. "If you're in danger, you should come with us." Emily handed the sleeping baby to Mason. "Benjamin Wilson is protecting me. Believe it or not, he and your father worked together years ago trying to expose the same network we're fighting now. But I need you to get Noah somewhere safe until I can complete what I started." The nurse interjected urgently. "They're coming upstairs now. You must go." Mason cradled Noah awkwardly, looking to Emily for more explanation. She merely touched the pendant around Noah's neck. "Everything you need to know is in here. Find Rachel Chen. She has the decryption key." As Mason hurried toward the service elevator with Rocky and Noah, he heard voices approaching from the main staircase. He recognized Deputy Chief Anderson's authoritative tone and Mayor Wilson's smooth political cadence. Martinez was waiting in the garden looking tense. His expression shifted to shock when he saw the baby in Mason's arms. "What the hell, Reed? This wasn't the plan." "Change of plans," Mason said tersely. "We need to go now." They made it to the car without being spotted, but as they pulled away from the property, Mason noticed a security camera pivoting to follow their movement. Their presence had been documented, which meant they were now officially compromised. "Want to tell me what's going on?" Martinez demanded once they were safely away from Cliffside. "Why do you have the baby Kitairi Inun?" Mason explained the encounter with Emily as Martinez drove circuitously, ensuring they weren't being followed. "So the mother voluntarily left the baby in the stroller for you to find with a misleading note because she wanted to create an official record of the pendant," Martinez summarized incredulously. "There's something on this pendant data of some kind," Mason said, examining the silver object around Noah's neck. "Emily said it has a false bottom." Martinez pulled over in a quiet spot overlooking the harbor. "Let me see that thing." Carefully, Mason removed the pendant from around Noah's neck and handed it to the detective. Martinez examined it closely, then pressed and twisted the edges in a specific sequence. The decorative face popped open to reveal a tiny, sophisticated-looking microchip embedded in the base. "This is military-grade tech," Martinez whispered in awe. "Looks like a secure data storage device." Emily said Rachel Chen has the decryption key. Mason remembered, "But I don't know how to find her again." Martinez returned the pendant to Mason. "This is way above our pay grade, Reed. We need to think carefully about our next move. If Anderson and the mayor are involved, the department isn't safe." Noah began to stir, making small fussing noises that threatened to escalate into full-blown cries. "First things first," Martinez said pragmatically. "We need supplies for the kid in a safe place to regroup." Mason's phone rang, startling him. Unknown number displayed on the screen. Officer Reed, a male voice he didn't recognize, spoke calmly. "This is James Hayes. I believe we have matters to discuss." "Hunting, father, turn." Mason gripped the phone tightly, his mind racing to process what he was hearing. "That's not possible." He managed finally. "James Hayes died in 1998. Unnecessary deception." The voice replied, one that protected you for 25 years until you found Noah and his pendant. Now we need to meet. Rachel Chen will arrange it. The baby's safety depends on it." Before Mason could respond, the call ended. He stared at the phone's shock, giving way to a maelstrom of emotions: confusion, anger, hope, suspicion. "What happened?" Martinez asked, noting Mason's expression. "Someone claiming to be James Hayes just called me." Mason said, his voice strained. "My supposedly dead biological father." Martinez's reaction was unexpected. Not surprise, but grim acknowledgement. "I wondered if he might still be alive. There were inconsistencies in the official record of his death that never sat right with me." "You knew," Mason demanded, anger flaring. "I suspected," Martinez corrected. "Your father and I were partners for 3 years. When he supposedly died of a sudden illness, right after Catherine's death with no autopsy and a closed casket funeral supervised by department officials. Let's just say it fit a pattern I'd seen before when someone needed to disappear." Noah began crying in earnest, his tiny face reddening with the effort. The immediate needs of the infant temporarily superseded Mason's emotional turmoil. Martinez directed him to a small convenience store where they purchased essential baby supplies: diapers, formula, bottles. "My cabin itinerary," Martinez suggested as Mason awkwardly fed Noah in the car. "It's about 40 minutes north of here, completely off the grid. No utilities connections, no property records under my name. I use it for fishing trips, but it's stocked with basics." The decision made, they headed north, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. Mason remained silent for much of the journey, his mind cycling through the implications of his father's possible survival, while Rocky maintained vigilant watch from the rear seat, occasionally checking on the baby carriers secured between them. Martinez's cabin proved to be a solid, if rustic, 2-room structure nestled in dense woods near a small lake. Solar panels provided minimal electricity, a wood stove offered heat, and a generator stood ready for additional power needs. It was exactly the kind of place that wouldn't appear on official searches. A refugee designed for someone who understood the value of remaining untraceable. "It's not much," Martinez acknowledged as they settled in, "but it's secure. No one knows about this place except my ex-wife, and she's in Arizona now." Mason created a makeshift crib from a drawer lined with blankets, settling Noah into it. Once the baby had been fed and changed, Rocky immediately positioned himself beside the improvised bassinet, his protective instincts apparently extending to include the infant in his charge. "Your dog seems to have adopted him," Martinez observed with a slight smile. "Rocky forms strong bonds with those he perceives as vulnerable." Mason explained, watching the shepherd's gentle vigilance with a mixture of pride and bewilderment at the strange circumstances that had brought them here. "It's what makes him exceptional at search and rescue. He doesn't just find people, he connects with them." As evening approached, Mason's phone rang again. Rachel Chen's number this time. "We need to move quickly," she said without preamble. "Benjamin Wilson's security cameras caught your extraction of Noah. He's containing the situation for now, telling Anderson and the mayor that his security personnel are handling a minor trespassing incident, but it won't hold for long." "Where's Emily?" Mason demanded. "Still at the Wilson estate. Benjamin is protecting her, but we need to reunite her with Noah and the pendant. Soon James is arranging secure transportation, so he is alive," Mason stated, still struggling to accept this reality. Rachel's voice softened slightly. "Yes, and he's been waiting 25 years for this moment when you would be ready to know the truth. But there's no time for a gentle reunion. Can you travel tonight?" Mason looked at Noah now, sleeping peacefully with Rocky standing guard. "The baby complicates things. Bring him," Rachel instructed. "And the detective, if he's willing." James says Martinez was one of the few he trusted in the old days. Martinez, hearing his name, raised a questioning eyebrow. When Mason explained the situation, the older detective nodded without hesitation. "I always figured I'd be pulled back into whatever Hayes was working on. Eventually, some cases never really close. They just wait for the right moment to resurface." 3 hours later, they were following Rachel's precise directions to a lakeside property approximately 50 miles north of Pinewood Harbor. The journey had been tense, with multiple route changes and counter-surveillance measures that Martinez implemented with practiced skill. Noah had remained mercifully quiet throughout, as if sensing the need for discretion, while Rocky maintained his alert vigilance from the rear seat. The property appeared at first glance to be a typical lakeside cabin: weathered clapboard exterior, modest dock extending into still water, surrounding woods providing natural privacy. But Mason noted the subtle security measures as they approached: carefully positioned exterior lighting, unobtrusive cameras disguised as birdhouses, sight lines cleared for optimal observation of approaching vehicles. "Someone's been living here a long time," Martinez commented, his experienced eye catching the same details. "And they're serious about not being surprised by visitors." Rachel Chen met them at the door, her expression a mixture of relief and tension. "They're inside," she said, simply leading them into the cabin. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, a blend of rustic charm and modern amenities, with walls lined with bookshelves and what appeared to be research materials. A fire cracked in a stone hearth, casting warm light across the main living area, where two people waited: an elegant, silver-haired man Mason recognized as Benjamin Wilson from news photographs, and beside him a figure that caused Mason's heart to stutter in his chest. James Hayes had aged well, despite the evident toll of years spent in hiding. In his mid-60s, now he retained the strong jawline and penetrating gaze that Mason had noted in department photographs from the 90s. Features Mason himself had inherited. His hair had gone completely silver, and lines of experience marked his face. But his posture remained straight, his presence commanding even in the simple cabin setting. For a long moment, father and son simply stared at each other. 25 years of separation crystallized in a single charged instant of recognition. Rocky, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, pressed against Mason's leg in silent support. "Modern Mason." James finally broke the silence, his voice rough with emotion. "You look so much like your mother." The complex surge of feelings, anger, relief, confusion, longing left Mason momentarily speechless. He was saved from immediate response by Noah's stirring in his carrier. James's attention immediately shifted to the infant, his expression softening. "And this must be Noah," he said, approaching carefully to look at the baby, Emily's son. "Where is Emily?" Mason found his voice. "Rachel said Benjamin was protecting her. She'll join us tomorrow," Benjamin Wilson explained. "We needed to ensure this location remains secure before bringing everyone together. The pendant is the priority now." Mason handed Noah to Rachel, who took the baby with practiced ease before confronting his father directly. 25 years. He stated the words carrying the weight of a lifetime of absence. "You let me believe you were dead. Let me be raised by strangers. The best choice among impossible options," James replied quietly. "When they killed Catherine, your mother, it was clear you would be next if I didn't disappear completely." The Reeds were trusted friends of Benjamin's, living far from Pinewood Harbor, and any connection to my investigation. Your adoption by them wasn't chance. It was the only way to keep you safe. Safe from what? Mason demanded. "What was worth abandoning your son?" James exchanged glances with Benjamin before answering. "A network of corruption that extends far beyond Pinewood Harbor. What began as local influence peddling evolved into something much more dangerous: and organized system, using coastal communities as cover for intelligence gathering, smuggling operations, and political manipulation. When your mother and I discovered the extent of it in '97, we became immediate targets. Catherine was eliminated first." Benjamin continued the explanation. "Made to look like natural causes, a previously undiagnosed heart condition." James recognized the pattern immediately. He had to make a choice: continue his investigation openly and risk your life as well, or disappear and work to expose the network from the Rockies. "So you chose the investigation?" Mason concluded bitterly. "I chose to stay alive to protect you," James corrected gently. "To build a case that would someday expose the people who murdered your mother and ensure they could never threaten you again." Every day of the past 25 years has been dedicated to that purpose. The rawness of Mason's emotions was interrupted by Rocky's sudden alert posture, ears, forward body, tense attention, fixed on the cabin door. Everyone froze, years of operational caution, evident in their immediate response to the shepherd's warning. "Someone's coming." Mason translated quietly, moving to dim the interior lights while James and Benjamin took defensive positions. Rachel quickly carried Noah to a back room, while Martinez drew his service weapon, positioning himself with a clear view of the entrance. A soft knock at the door broke the tense silence. James nodded to Mason, indicating he should respond. With Rocky at his side and his own weapon ready, Mason approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" he called. "Captain Davis," came the reply, causing Mason to tense further. "I'm alone." James shook his head in warning, but Benjamin moved forward. "Let him in," he directed. "Thomas is one of us." The revelation that Captain Davis, Mason's mentor and superior officer, was connected to this conspiracy of secrets added yet another layer to the increasingly complex situation. Mason opened the door cautiously, Rocky positioning himself for potential intervention. Captain Davis entered slowly, hands visible to show he carried no weapon. His expression revealed no surprise at finding James Hayes alive. Only grim satisfaction, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. "Hayes," he acknowledged with a nod, "you look pretty good for a dead man." Circumstances required a convincing performance. James replied evenly, "What brings you here, Thomas?" "This location is supposed to be secure." It was, Davis confirmed, until Reed and Martinez made their rather conspicuous exit from Benjamin's charity event. Deputy Chief Anderson has mobilized department resources to locate them, and the baby officially a kidnapping investigation. I needed to warn you that they've activated emergency cell tower tracking. Mason immediately removed the battery from his phone, Martinez following suit. The urgency of their situation had just increased exponentially. They were now officially fugitives, according to department records. "What about Emily?" Benjamin asked, concern evident in his voice. "Still secure at your estate," Davis assured him. "Anderson believes she left before Reed's intrusion, but they're watching the property now, which means we need a new extraction plan for her." The tactical discussion continued, with Davis providing details of the department's search parameters, while James and Benjamin considered alternative safe houses and transportation options. Mason observed the interaction with growing awareness that this was no hastily assembled response to a crisis. These men had worked together for years, perhaps decades, preparing for exactly this scenario. "The pendant," Davis finally said, turning to Mason. "That's what matters now." Emily succeeded where Catherine and James could only make partial progress. She found documented proof of the entire network structure, including offshore accounts, blackmail material, and operational protocols. Mason looked to his father for confirmation. James nodded solemnly. "The data Emily encrypted into that pendant represents 25 years of investigation, combined with her own cybersecurity expertise. It's everything we need to expose the entire operation, not just in Pinewood Harbor, but in dozens of coastal communities connected through what they call the Harbor Network." Rachel returned from the back room, having settled Noah. "The problem is accessing the data securely," she explained. "The pendant's encryption requires both physical access to the chip and a decryption key that Emily designed specifically for this purpose." "Which you have?" Mason asked, remembering Emily's words at the Wilson estate. Rachel shook her head. "Not exactly. I have part of the process, but the complete decryption requires Emily's direct involvement. It's deliberately structured to prevent any individual, even those of us working with her, from accessing the data independently." The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer to Mason. This wasn't simply about local corruption or his father's fake death. It was about a sophisticated criminal network that had operated for decades with impunity, that had killed his mother and forced his father into hiding, and that now threatened Noah and Emily because they possessed evidence that could expose the entire operation. "So what's the plan?" Mason asked, finally setting aside his personal turmoil to focus on the immediate threat. Rocky, sensing his shift in attention, moved to his side attentively. "We need to get Emily here safely." James outlined then secure access to the pendant data and transmit it to federal authorities. Benjamin has been cultivating specifically FBI agents outside the network's influence. Once the evidence is secure and distributed, local authorities like Anderson lose their protection. And until then, Mason pressed, "We protect Noah, secure the pendant, and prepare to move quickly when circumstances align." James replied with the calm precision of someone accustomed to long-term strategic planning. "Benjamin will return to maintain his cover and arrange Emily's extraction. The rest of us will prepare this location for potential discovery and evacuation." As the others moved to implement their roles in this plan, Mason found himself momentarily alone with his father, the man whose absence had shaped his entire life, whose choices had set in motion the events that now engulfed them all. "I know you have questions," James said quietly. "More than we could possibly address in one conversation. But there's something you should understand about your mother. Catherine wasn't just my wife. She was the heart of this investigation from the beginning." Her analytical skills identified patterns in coastal community governance that no one else had connected. When they killed her, they thought they were eliminating a threat. They didn't realize she had already trained me to see what she saw. Mason studied his father's face, seeing grief still raw despite the passage of decades. And now Emily Parker has continued her work. James nodded. Catherine would have liked Emily. The same determination, the same unwillingness to look away from uncomfortable truths. When Emily discovered the network's digital footprints during her work on Pinewood Harbor's municipal archives, she recognized the patterns Catherine had documented years earlier. Rocky suddenly raised his head alertly, but his posture suggested recognition rather than threat. Moments later, Rachel appeared with Noah in her arms, the baby now awake and observing his surroundings with wide eyes. "He's hungry," she explained, holding out the infant toward Mason. "And I need to help Benjamin prepare for his return to town." Mason accepted Noah awkwardly, still unaccustomed to handling something so small and vulnerable. Rocky immediately moved closer, his attention focused on the baby with evident concern. James watched the interaction with a complex expression. Pride mingled with regret, the weight of missed years evident in his gaze. "You know," James observed softly, "you have your mother's hands. Catherine could calm any child with her touch. You seem to have inherited that gift." As if confirming this assessment, Noah settled against Mason's chest, his earlier fussing subsiding into curious observation of his surroundings. Rocky maintained his protective position, occasionally sniffing gently at the baby's feet, causing Noah to produce a startled gurgle that might have been the beginning of a laugh. In that moment, surrounded by danger and uncertainty connected to a father, he'd believed dead and responsible for a child he'd never expected to protect. Mason experienced a strange sense of alignment, as if disparate pieces of his life were finally revealing their proper arrangement. Rocky's steady presence beside him, the weight of Noah in his arms, and the watchful gaze of his father created a bridge between past and present that transcended the years of separation and secrets. "We should discuss watch rotations for the night," Mason said finally, professional training reasserting itself. "Rocky can provide early warning of approaches, but he needs rest cycles too." James smiled slightly, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You sound like your mother. She was always the practical one, focusing on immediate necessities while I got lost in the bigger picture." Together, father and son began planning their security protocols for the night ahead, the tactical discussion providing neutral ground where they could begin rebuilding a relationship fractured by decades of absence and deception. Throughout their planning, Rocky remained vigilant beside them, a silent guardian, bridging the generations with his unwavering loyalty and protective instinct. As darkness settled over the lakeside cabin, Mason found himself standing on the small dock. Noah finally asleep inside under Rachel's watchful care. Rocky sat beside him, both of them gazing across the still water that reflected stars in perfect mirror images. The shepherd's presence provided an anchor of normalcy in what had become an increasingly surreal situation. "He's a remarkable animal," James commented, approaching quietly from behind. "Catherine would have loved him. She always believed the purest bonds transcended words." Mason turned slightly, acknowledging his father's presence without fully facing him. "Rocky's saved my life twice. Once during a drug raid in Boston that went bad, and once when a suspect tried to ambush me during a domestic disturbance call. He sensed the danger of both times before I did." James nodded, understanding the unspoken trust such experiences would build. "Your mother had that same intuitive sense about people. She could read intentions beneath words, recognize patterns in seemingly random events. It made her an exceptional analyst and a target when she applied those skills to Pinewood Harbor's power structure." They stood in silence for several moments, the weight of unasked questions hanging between them. Finally, Mason voiced the one that had been circling in his mind since the revelation of his father's survival. "Did you ever consider that there might have been another way, that disappearing completely wasn't the only option?" Every day, James admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Every birthday I missed, every Christmas, every milestone I could only imagine from a distance. But the alternative was unthinkable. After what they did to Catherine, I couldn't risk losing you too." The admission, simple and devastating in its sincerity, penetrated Mason's carefully maintained professional detachment. For 25 years, he had lived as Mason Reed, adoptive son of Simon and Laura Reed, with only the vaguest understanding of his biological origins. The discovery that his entire life had been shaped by a father's desperate choice to protect him at the cost of their relationship created an emotional complexity he wasn't prepared to fully process. Rocky sensed his handler's turmoil, pressing against Mason's leg in silent comfort. The shepherd's intuitive response drew a small smile from James. "He understands you," the older man observed quietly. "That connection, it's rare and valuable. Catherine would say it transcends the limitations of separate species. That true partnership creates something greater than its individual components." Mason looked down at Rocky, whose steady gaze reflected unwavering loyalty, despite the chaotic circumstances surrounding them. "He's the most honest relationship in my life." Mason acknowledged, no hidden agendas, no buried secrets, just mutual trust and shared purpose. James accepted the implicit criticism without defense. "When this is over, when the network is exposed and you're no longer in danger, I hope we might find a way forward. Not to reclaim what was lost, because those years can't be recovered, but to build something new from what remains." Before Mason could respond, Rocky tensed suddenly, his attention shifting sharply toward the surrounding woods. The shepherd's posture communicated clear alert. Someone was approaching the property from the forest side, away from the main access road. Inside, James directed immediately operational focus, replacing the emotional openness of moments before. "Alert the others. Defensive positions, right to terrain." Mason signaled Rocky to maintain alert status while moving quickly back to the cabin, where Martinez and Rachel were already responding to the shepherd's distant warning barks. Davis emerged from the back room where he'd been resting, his service weapon drawn and ready. Approached from the northwest, Mason reported tersely, "Rocky's behavior suggests multiple subjects moving with stealth, not Benjamin returning." Rachel concluded quickly, moving to secure Noah. "He would approach from the main road and signal his arrival." "Network security team," James assessed grimly. "They must have tracked us despite precautions." The cabin's lights were immediately extinguished, defensive positions established around the small structure, with clear fields of fire covering all potential approach angles. Rocky remained at Mason's side, his heightened senses providing crucial early warning of the intruder's movements. "They're surrounding the property," Mason translated from Rocky's increasingly tense behavior. "At least 5 individuals, possibly more. Standard tactical approach." Davis confirmed from his position covering the rear entrance. "They'll secure the perimeter before attempting entry." James made a swift decision. "Rachel, take Noah through the concealed tunnel in the back pantry. It exits near the boathouse, where there's an emergency vehicle with supplies, Martinez will go with you as security. The revelation of a hidden escape tunnel confirmed Mason's growing awareness that this cabin had been designed specifically as a secure fallback position, a carefully prepared sanctuary for exactly this type of contingency. A pendant. Mason reminded them the primary objective still clear, despite the immediate threat. Rachel nodded, already securing Noah in a specialized carrier designed for quick movement. I have it along with Emily's initial decryption protocols. We'll delay them. James continued, his voice calm despite the escalating danger. Give you time to clear the area and reach the secondary safe house. Davis, Mason, and I will create a diversion, then follow the eastern escape route Wanya. The plan was executed with practiced efficiency, Rachel and Martinez disappearing through the concealed passage with Noah, while Davis positioned himself to cover their escape. Mason and Rocky moved to the front of the cabin, the shepherd's low growls indicating the intruders were preparing to breach the perimeter. Rocky can track them after we separate. Mason told his father professional focus, narrowing his attention to immediate tactical concerns. His night navigation is exceptional, and he can detect surveillance equipment that might be deployed along escape routes. James nodded approval. Catherine always said working dogs represented the perfect balance of instinct and discipline. She would be proud to see you partnered with such an animal. Before Mason could respond, the first attack came, not the direct assault they had anticipated, but a more sophisticated approach. Small canisters crashed through multiple windows, simultaneously releasing billowing clouds of what appeared to be smoke, but carried the distinctive chemical signature of tactical disorientation agents. Gas masks. James directed sharply, retrieving equipment from a concealed compartment near the fireplace. The preparation confirmed Mason's assessment that his father had spent years anticipating this exact scenario. Rocky's training included gas exposure protocols. The shepherd immediately pressed close to Mason, allowing his handler to secure a specialized K9 protective mask over his sensitive nasal passages before donning his own protection. Davis was similarly equipped. Within seconds, the three of them now prepared to operate within the contaminated environment. Northeast exit, James directed through his mask, leading them toward what appeared to be a solid wall, but revealed itself to be a concealed door when activated by a hidden mechanism. They'll focus on standard entry points first. The hidden passage led to a small equipment room containing emergency supplies, communications gear, and what appeared to be a small arsenal of defensive weapons. James quickly distributed additional equipment. Night vision devices, communications headsets, and specialized ammunition that Mason recognized as designed for maximum suppressive effect with minimal lethal potential. Not the non-lethal engagement only, James instructed. Many of these operators are simply hired security, unaware of the network's true nature. Our objective is escape and evasion, not casualties. The tactical professionalism of James Hayes, evident in his equipment preparation, contingency planning, and ethical engagement parameters, provided Mason another window into the man his father had become during their years of separation. This wasn't just a detective who had discovered corruption. This was someone who had evolved into a complete counterintelligence operator, maintaining operational security while never losing sight of moral boundaries. Their exit from the cabin was timed to coincide with the main assault team's breach of the primary entrance, the resulting confusion allowing them to slip into the surrounding forest, while attention was focused on the structure itself. Rocky took point, his enhanced senses and night training, making him an ideal pathfinder through the dark woods. Rachel's team should have reached the boathouse by now. James commented through their secure communication system as they moved efficiently through the forest. The diversionary vehicle will draw pursuit north while they take the secondary route eastward. And our extraction, Mason asked, following Rocky's lead as the shepherd navigated around potential surveillance positions. There's a maintenance shed approximately 1 mile east. Davis supplied emergency transportation, stored their off-road, capable vehicle with clean documentation. The coordinated precision of their escape plan impressed Mason professionally, while raising personal questions about the extensive preparation that had preceded this moment. His father had clearly spent decades building this security infrastructure, maintaining safe houses and escape routes that would allow him to continue his investigation while evading network detection. Rocky suddenly froze his posture. Communicating detection of nearby threats, Mason signaled immediate halt, relaying the shepherd's alert to James and Davis through hand gestures. Seconds later, flashlight beams cut through the forest approximately 50 yards to their right, search teams following their projected escape route. With practiced coordination, they adjusted their course using Rocky's sensory advantages to navigate around the search pattern. The shepherd's capabilities proved invaluable, providing early warning of approach vectors and identifying safe passages through increasingly concentrated search efforts. They had nearly reached the designated extraction point when Rocky's behavior changed again. Not the alert posture indicating human threats, but a different signal that Mason recognized from their training scenarios. The shepherd had detected electronic surveillance ahead, likely monitoring equipment positioned to identify anyone approaching the maintenance shed. Rocky's alerting to electronic surveillance. Mason whispered through their communication system, "The extraction point may be compromised." James processed this information with calm efficiency. Contingency route Delta. Davis confirmed access status. Delta route remains viable according to last check. Davis confirmed quietly, but requires water crossing approximately half-mile north of our position. The revised extraction plan directed them away from the maintenance shed toward what Mason presumed was yet another prepared evacuation route. Throughout the adjustment, Rocky maintained a point position, his specialized detection abilities, repeatedly warning them of search teams and surveillance equipment that might otherwise have compromised their movement. After approximately 40 minutes of carefully coordinated evasion, they reached the edge of a small tributary feeding into the main lake. A concealed cache beneath fallen logs contained waterproof bags and a collapsible, inflatable craft designed for minimal noise and thermal signature. "The current will carry us to the northeastern inlet," James explained as they quickly prepared the craft. Secondary transportation waiting there maintained by contacts outside network influence. As they prepared to launch their small craft into the dark water, Davis received an encrypted communication through the secure system James had provided. His expression shifted to concern as he processed the information. Rachel's team reached the secondary safe house. He reported, but Benjamin Wilson has been detained by Anderson official, questioning regarding Emily Parker's whereabouts. Benjamin knows the protocols. James replied with confidence that suggested years of preparation for such contingencies. He can maintain deniability for at least 72 hours, enough time for us to execute the primary plan, which is, Mason asked, still navigating the layers of strategy his father had apparently developed over decades of covert investigation. Fletchery, getting Emily and Noah together at a secure location where she can complete the decryption of the pendant data, James explained as they carefully entered the watercraft, then transmission to federal authorities outside network influence. Benjamin has been cultivating contacts in the FBI's Portland field office, specifically agents investigating similar patterns in other coastal communities, without realizing the connections between them. Rocky settled in the craft with practiced ease, suggesting this wasn't his first water-based operation. The shepherd's adaptability continued to impress Mason, reinforcing his appreciation for the training and trust they had built over their years together. As they navigated the dark waterway, Mason found himself in the surreal position of participating in a sophisticated evasion operation alongside the father he had believed dead for 25 years. The professional respect he felt for James Hayes's tactical planning and operational security warred with the personal resentment of decades of absence and deception. "You've prepared for every contingency," Mason observed quietly as they approached their extraction point. "How long have you been anticipating this particular scenario?" "Since the day I died," James admitted. "Everything, the safe houses, the escape routes, the secure communications, has been developed with one purpose: to eventually expose the network completely without risk to you or others involved in the investigation." "And Emily Parker, How does she fit into your decades of planning? She found us, James explained. 3 years ago, while working on digitizing Pinewood Harbor's municipal archives, she discovered irregularities that match patterns Catherine had documented in her original research. Being a skilled cybersecurity specialist, Emily recognized the significance and began her own investigation. Rachel Chen, who had been one of my few trusted contacts over the years, recognized Emily's inquiries and made the connection. "So you recruited her?" Mason pressed, trying to understand the relationship between his father's long-term investigation and Emily's more recent discoveries. "Made it more like a partnership of mutual necessity," James clarified. "Emily had technical skills and access we lacked, while we provided historical context and security protocols developed over decades. Together, we finally assembled what Catherine had begun: comprehensive documentation of the entire network structure, sufficient to withstand legal challenges and expose every level of the organization." Davis signaled from the front of the craft they were approaching the extraction point. Rocky's alertness increased. The shepherd, sensing the transition to another phase of their operation. As they secured the craft and moved toward the concealed vehicle, James had described Mason found himself evaluating his father not just as the abstract figure whose absence had shaped his childhood, but as the operational leader whose planning might now determine all their survival. The extraction vehicle, a nondescript SUV with off-road capabilities, was exactly where James had indicated, equipped with secure communications, emergency supplies, and clean documentation that would withstand routine inspection. As they prepared to depart, James provided their destination, a private medical facility, approximately 3 hours northeast, where Rachel Martinez and Noah were already securely established. "And Emily?" Mason asked as they began their journey through back roads carefully selected to avoid surveillance. "Benjamin was arranging her extraction before he was detained," James explained. "If he couldn't complete that process, she has secondary protocols to follow. The facility we're heading to is one of our designated rendezvous points." As they drove through the night, Rocky finally relaxed from his operational alertness, settling into the vigilant rest that characterized his behavior when immediate threats had passed, but security remained a concern. Mason found himself similarly suspended between heightened tactical awareness and the emotional processing of his radically transformed understanding of his own history. "I have one question," he said finally after miles of silence. "Why now, after 25 years of secrecy and separation? Why reveal yourself at this particular moment?" James considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Several factors converged," he said carefully. "My health is declining, pancreatic cancer diagnosed 6 months ago. Treatment is extending my time, but the prognosis is ultimately terminal. That created urgency to complete what Catherine and I started before it's too late." The revelation of his father's illness struck Mason unexpectedly. The man beside him, composed, tactical, seemingly indestructible in his preparation and execution, was fighting a battle that no amount of strategic planning could ultimately win. Additionally, James continued unaware of the impact his casual disclosure had created. Emily's discovery provided the final pieces we needed: digital evidence that could withstand legal scrutiny and expose the entire network structure. "And then there was you." "Me?" Mason questioned. "Your transfer to Pinewood Harbor 3 years ago," James explained. "It wasn't coincidence that placed you and Rocky on patrol at precisely the location and time where Emily would leave Noah Benjamin arrange your assignment through department contacts, positioning you to become involved at exactly the right moment." The implication that his career decisions had been subtly influenced by his father's network created a fresh wave of complicated emotions for Mason. The autonomy he had believed characterized his professional life appeared increasingly illusory, part of a larger design he hadn't recognized until now. "So I've been a piece on your chessboard," Mason concluded with an edge to his voice. "Positioned without my knowledge or consent." James shook his head firmly. "Not a piece of player whose moves we anticipated because we recognized your inherent character. Your adoptive parents raised you with strong ethical foundations. Your choice of law enforcement career your partnership with Rocky, your reputation for integrity within the department, these were all your authentic decisions that reflected who you truly are. We simply created opportunities for those authentic choices to intersect with our investigation at the appropriate moment. Rocky stirred in the back seat, sensing his handler's emotional turbulence. The shepherd pushed his muzzle between the front seats, offering tactile reassurance in his characteristic way. Mason absently stroked the dog's head, finding the familiar contact grounding amid the disorienting revelations. "Catherine would be so proud of who you've become," James said quietly. "Not because you followed the path we might have chosen for you, but because you developed the strength of character and moral clarity she valued above all else. The fact that you found your way back to Pinewood Harbor, that you chose to partner with a working dog, that you questioned authority when confronted with inconsistencies, these all reflect qualities she hoped you would develop even without her direct influence." The reference to his mother, a woman he couldn't consciously remember, but whose legacy apparently continued to shape his life, created yet another layer of complexity in Mason's emotional landscape. As they continued their journey through the darkness, Rocky maintained his gentle contact, providing a constant reminder of the most honest and uncomplicated relationship in Mason's increasingly complicated existence. Dawn was breaking when they finally approached their destination, a modern facility nestled in a secluded valley, its architecture suggesting a high-end rehabilitation center rather than the secure operational base it apparently served. James's security protocols were verified through multiple checkpoints before they were granted access to the main building. Inside, they were immediately directed to a comfortable conference room where Rachel Chen waited alongside Martinez, Emily Parker, and baby Noah. The reunion confirmed that all essential personnel had reached safety despite the network's coordinated pursuit, a testament to James Hayes' decades of preparation. "Emily reached us approximately 2 hours ago," Rachel reported efficiently. Benjamin's contingency extraction plan functioned as designed despite his personal detention. Emily Parker looked exhausted, but determined as she cradled Noah, who appeared untroubled by the dramatic events surrounding his young life. Rocky immediately approached mother and child, sniffing gently before sitting protectively beside them, his instinctive assessment apparently confirming their identity and accepting them under his protection. "The pendant," James asked, focusing on their operational priorities. "Secure," Emily confirmed. "I've begun preliminary decryption protocols, but the final stages require specialized equipment available here." She looked toward Mason with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for protecting him. Your father said we could trust you completely, and he was right." The simple acknowledgement of his role in their intricate plan provided Mason unexpected satisfaction, a confirmation that despite being unknowingly incorporated into his father's decades-long strategy, his individual choices and actions had proven meaningful. "How long will complete decryption require?" Davis asked, his professional focus on immediate security concerns. "Approximately 12 hours. Emily estimated the security protocols I built into the data storage require progressive validation steps that can't be accelerated without risking corruption." James nodded, understanding. "The facility is secure for now, but we should prepare for potential compromise. Once decryption begins, we'll establish communication with federal contacts to prepare for evidence transmission and protective custody arrangements." As the operational planning continued, Mason found himself watching the interaction between his father and Emily Parker, noting the easy professional rapport that suggested years of collaborative work. Their complementary expertise had apparently bridged generational differences, creating an effective partnership focused on completing Catherine Hayes' interrupted investigation. Rocky remained close to Noah throughout the discussion, the shepherd's protective instincts extending naturally to include the infant in his security parameters. Mason observed this behavior with a mixture of professional pride and personal reflection, the dog's uncomplicated loyalty providing a stark contrast to the complex human relationships unfolding around them. Later, as Emily began the technical process of accessing the pendant's encrypted data, Mason found a quiet moment with his father in the facility's small courtyard. Rocky accompanied them, maintaining his vigilant presence while enjoying the morning sunshine. What happens after? Mason asked finally. Assuming the decryption succeeds and the evidence reaches appropriate authorities, what happens to all of us when this is finished? James considered the question thoughtfully, his gaze following Rocky's alert movements around the courtyard perimeter. For Emily and Noah, federal witness protection likely awaits new identities in locations far from coastal influence. For Davis and Martinez, difficult professional reckonings with careers built within compromised institutions. For Rachel, continued work with federal agencies, developing security protocols against similar network formations. And for us, Mason pressed the question encompassing the unresolved relationship between father and son as much as their practical futures. That, James replied softly, depends entirely on what you want. Mason, I've lived 25 years with the consequences of choices made to protect you. I won't presume to impose my presence in your life now without your explicit permission. The humble acknowledgement of boundaries surprised Mason, who had been preparing arguments against presumed paternal expectations. Before he could formulate a response, Rocky suddenly tensed his attention, fixing on the facility's main entrance with the alert posture that indicated recognition rather than threat. Moments later, a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair entered the courtyard, moving with the confident stride of someone familiar with the facility. James's expression registered surprise, followed by genuine pleasure as he stood to greet her. Eleanor, he acknowledged warmly, I didn't expect you until tomorrow. Circumstances accelerated the timeline. The woman replied, her assessing gaze moving immediately to Mason. So this is Catherine's son. It wasn't a question, but an evaluation delivered with analytical precision rather than sentiment. Mason, James performed the introduction formally. This is Eleanor Hayes, your mother's sister and my longest-serving ally in this investigation. Eleanor, this is Mason Reed. The revelation of an aunt he had never known existed added yet another layer to Mason's expanding understanding of his family history. Eleanor Hayes studied him with unabashed interest, noting resemblances and differences with professional detachment. He has Catherine's analytical gaze. She observed to James before addressing Mason directly. And you've chosen an exceptional working partner. She nodded toward Rocky, who had approached to investigate this new arrival. Belgian Malinois German Shepherd. Cross-Eye believes superior scent discrimination and threat response capabilities compared to purebred lines. Mason blinked in surprise at her accurate assessment of Rocky's breeding information, not obvious to casual observation. Yes, that's correct. Rocky's been my partner for 3 years. Eleanor nodded approval. Catherine would appreciate the symbolism you finding your way to a partnership based on mutual trust and clear communication, despite growing up without her influence. She turned to James with more immediate concerns. Benjamin's interrogation is proceeding according to projected parameters. He's maintaining his cover narrative effectively, but Anderson has requested federal assistance with the investigation, likely an attempt to involve network compromise agencies. The tactical discussion continued with Eleanor providing updates on multiple operational fronts that suggested a sophisticated intelligence network extending far beyond what Mason had imagined. Throughout the briefing, Rocky maintained close proximity to Mason, occasionally checking the courtyard perimeter with professional diligence. As the day progressed, the facility transformed into an operational center, coordinating multiple aspects of their final approach to exposing the harbor network. Emily's decryption process continued under technical supervision, with periodic updates indicating successful progression through security protocols. Mason found himself increasingly integrated into the operational planning. His professional experience and Rocky's specialized capabilities acknowledged as valuable assets by James, Eleanor, and the others. By evening, the first sections of decrypted data had been analyzed, revealing the comprehensive nature of Emily's evidence. Financial records, communication logs, blackmail material, operational protocols, all meticulously documented and cross-referenced, to create an irrefutable case against the entire harbor network structure. This validates everything Catherine theorized. James observed with quiet satisfaction as they reviewed the initial findings, the pattern of coastal community manipulation, the progression from local corruption to coordinated regional operations, the infiltration of law enforcement and governance structures. She identified it all before anyone else recognized the connections and died for that recognition. Eleanor added soberly, as did many others who approached too closely to the truth over the decades. Mason studied the evidence with professional interest, noting the sophisticated structure of what had appeared on the surface to be merely local corruption. The harbor network's operations extended beyond traditional criminal enterprises into what effectively constituted private intelligence gathering and influence peddling on a scale that threatened legitimate governance. The pendant contains only a portion of the complete evidence package. Emily explained as she continued monitoring the decryption process. I established multiple redundancies and distributed documentation across secure locations insurance against interception or compromise. A lesson learned from Catherine's experience. James acknowledged with a mixture of pride and grief. She maintained single-source documentation, which made her vulnerable when they identified her as a threat. As night fell, security protocols intensified around the facility. Eleanor's intelligence sources indicated increased network activity throughout the region, suggesting they had identified the general vicinity of the operation, if not its precise location. Rocky remained on heightened alert, his training and instincts providing an additional layer of security that complemented the facility's technological measures. Mason found himself working alongside his father. With increasing comfort, their shared professional focus, creating a foundation for connection that circumvented the more complicated emotional terrain of their personal relationship. James's tactical expertise and strategic planning reflected decades of disciplined opposition to the network's operations, while Mason's current law enforcement experience provided valuable insight into departmental procedures and potential vulnerabilities. In quiet moments, Mason observed his father with Noah, noting the gentle expertise with which James handled the infant, suggesting practice rather than natural ability. When he finally commented on this observation, James smiled slightly. I volunteered at a children's hospital for many years. He explained pediatric cancer wards specifically, something about helping children facing their own mortality. It provided perspective on my separation from you. A reminder that there are many forms of loss and many ways to find meaning despite that loss. The revelation of this aspect of his father's life during their years apart affected Mason, deeply complicating his understanding of James Hayes beyond the single-minded investigator he had initially perceived. This was a man who had built a life of purpose despite devastating personal sacrifice, who had found ways to channel grief into meaningful action on multiple fronts. As midnight approached, Emily announced a breakthrough in the decryption process. They had successfully accessed the core documentation containing the network's organizational structure and operational protocols. The evidence revealed a sophisticated hierarchy, with Deputy Chief Anderson serving as Pinewood Harbor's primary enforcer, while Mayor Wilson functioned as the public-facing component, managing political relationships and legitimate business connections. Benjamin's position was uniquely compromised, James explained as they reviewed the organizational charts. As the mayor's brother, he was presumed loyal to network interests, which allowed him to operate as our inside source for years without detection. Until now, Eleanor added grimly, his cover's almost certainly compromised after recent events, regardless of how effectively he maintains his denial during interrogation. The immediate priorities shifted to establishing secure communication with federal contacts Benjamin had cultivated, specifically FBI Special Agent Diana Winters, who had been investigating similar patterns in other coastal communities. Without recognizing the broader network connections, Eleanor managed this delicate communication process using secure channels and authentication protocols developed over years of covert operation. By dawn, a coordinated federal response was taking shape. Agent Winters had received initial evidence packages and secured authorization for a multi-jurisdictional task force targeting harbor network operations across several states. The operation would require precise timing to prevent network compromise officials from warning targets or destroying evidence. Throughout these developments, Rocky remained Mason's constant companion, the shepherd's steady presence providing continuity amid the rapidly evolving situation. The dog's exceptional situational awareness had proven valuable multiple times, alerting to potential security concerns before electronic systems detected them. Identifying trustworthy personnel through behavioral assessment and maintaining protective watch over Noah during vulnerable moments. As preparations for the federal operation intensified, Mason found himself drawn to a quiet corner of the facility where James sat reviewing Catherine's original research notes, preserved documents that had apparently traveled with him throughout his years in hiding. She created the foundation for everything we're doing now, James explained without looking up, somehow aware of Mason's approach despite his quiet movement. Every connection we've established, every pattern we've documented, Catherine saw it first decades before anyone else recognized what was happening in these coastal communities. Mason settled into a chair beside his father, Rocky, lying attentively at his feet. "Tell me about her," he requested simply, "not the investigator or the analyst, the person my mother." James closed the file carefully, considering the request with appropriate weight. Catherine loved thunderstorms. He began, his voice softening with memory. While others would seek shelter, she would sit on the porch of our first house in Pinewood Harbor, counting seconds between lightning and thunder. She said it was nature's way of reminding humans that some forces remain beyond our control or comprehension. He paused, gathering additional memories from decades past. When you were very small, she would hold you up to the window during storms, narrating the lightning patterns, as if they were a celestial language you might someday understand. She believed in preparing you for both the beauty and ferocity of the world. Rocky shifted position, slightly settling his head on Mason's foot as the conversation continued, his canine sensitivity, perhaps detecting the emotional significance of this exchange between father and son. For the first time since discovering his father's survival, Mason felt a genuine connection forming, not through shared tactical objectives or professional cooperation, but through the carefully preserved memories of a woman they had both loved and lost. As James continued sharing memories of Catherine, her passion for maritime history, her quirky habit of categorizing people by their resemblance to sea creatures, her absolute moral clarity when confronted with injustice, Mason began forming an image of his mother that transcended the few photographs and official records he had discovered. She emerged as a fully realized individual whose influence had shaped both men's lives, even in her physical absence. Their conversation was eventually interrupted by Eleanor's arrival with urgent updates. The federal operation was proceeding, with arrest warrants being executed against key network personnel in multiple jurisdictions. Initial reports indicated successful apprehension of major figures, including Deputy Chief Anderson and several members of Pinewood Harbor's governmental structure. Benjamin has been secured, Eleanor reported with evident satisfaction. Agent Winters personally handled his extraction from department custody, officially listed as transfer to federal protection due to developing case parameters. This positive development was tempered by concerning intelligence regarding potential compromise of their current location. Network resources were being mobilized in their general vicinity, suggesting conventional security measures might soon be insufficient. "We need to move Emily and the evidence to federal custody immediately," James decided, shifting seamlessly from reflective father to operational commander. "Eleanor, coordinate transport options with Winters Mason. You and Rocky conduct perimeter assessment. The Shepherd's sensory capabilities may detect approach vectors before our technical systems. The facility mobilized with practiced efficiency personnel, securing documentation and preparing transportation for their highest value assets. Emily, Noah, and the decrypted evidence that would dismantle the harbor network's decades of operation." Mason and Rocky conducted their assigned perimeter assessment, the Shepherd's heightened senses, providing early warning of potential surveillance attempts from surrounding woodlands. As evacuation preparations continued, Mason found himself working alongside his father with increasing synchronization. Their shared tactical approach and complementary skills, creating an effective partnership. Despite their limited time together, Rocky integrated seamlessly into their security protocols, his specialized training and natural abilities, enhancing the team's overall effectiveness. The federal extraction team arrived with precise timing and professional discipline. Agent Diana Winters personally leading the operation to secure Emily Noah and the evidence for protected transport to secure facilities. The handover proceeded according to established protocols, with James providing comprehensive briefing on the evidence structure and potential network countermeasures. Throughout the process, Rocky maintained vigilant oversight, his behavior indicating continued confidence in the operational security. Despite the heightened tension, Mason had learned to trust the shepherd's assessment of situations, Rocky's sensory perception and behavioral recognition, often identifying threats or trustworthiness more accurately than human observation alone. As the federal team prepared for departure, Agent Winters approached Mason directly. "Your contributions to this operation have been noted at the highest levels," she informed him professionally. "When this is completed, I'd like to discuss potential opportunities within our specialized investigation units. Your partnership with Rocky represents exactly the kind of resource we need for complex corruption cases. The unexpected job offer, particularly its acknowledgement of Rocky as an integral component, rather than merely equipment registered as significant to Mason." After the dissolution of his position in Pinewood Harbor, which now seemed inevitable given his role in exposing departmental corruption, federal service represented a logical progression for his career and Rocky's specialized capabilities. Before he could formulate a response alarm systems activated throughout the facility perimeter sensors, indicating multiple approach vectors consistent with tactical assault patterns. The network had apparently located their position and mobilized resources for a direct intervention before the federal team could complete extraction, and accelerate departure. James directed immediately professional calm, masking any concern he might feel. Primary assets to transport vehicles, now security team will establish delay perimeter to ensure extraction window. The practiced precision with which all personnel responded to this development confirmed Mason's assessment that such scenarios had been repeatedly simulated and prepared for Emily, and Noah were immediately moved to armored vehicles under federal protection, while evidence materials were secured through redundant transport protocols to prevent single-point vulnerability. James addressed him directly as the evacuation proceeded around them. "You and Rocky should accompany the federal team. Your skills will be valuable in securing their extraction route." The instruction was tactically sound, but carried additional weight beneath its professional surface. A father's continuing priority to ensure his son's safety, even at potential cost to himself. Mason recognized this subtext immediately. "Rocky's sensory capabilities are more valuable here," he countered firmly. "He can provide early warning of attack vectors and identify optimal counter positions. I'm staying with the security team." James held his son's gaze for a moment before nodding. Acceptance not merely of the tactical assessment, but of the deeper statement it represented. Mason choosing to stand alongside his father, rather than accept safer assignment away from immediate danger. As the federal transport departed with Emily Noah and the evidence that represented decades of investigation, Mason positioned himself with Rocky at the facility's northern perimeter. The approach vector his father had assigned them to monitor James and Eleanor established command coordination from the facility's security center, while Davis and Martinez secured other potential access points. Rocky's behavior provided the first concrete confirmation of approaching hostile forces. His alert posture and directional focus indicating movement through the forested terrain approximately 200 yards from their position. Mason relayed this intelligence through their secure communication system, allowing defensive resources to be adjusted accordingly. Multiple approach vectors confirmed. Eleanor's voice came through the communication system. Estimated 20+ hostiles using tactical formation, consistent with private security contractors, electronic countermeasures, active expect communication disruption in approximately 3 minutes. The professionalism of both the attacking force and their own defensive preparation created an almost surreal operational environment. Like opposing chess masters acknowledging each other's expertise while committed to their respective objectives. Mason positioned himself and Rocky optimally for both observation and potential engagement. Their partnership functioning with the seamless coordination developed through years of tactical deployment. The initial contact came precisely where Rocky had indicated tactical teams employing professional assault protocols against the facility's northern perimeter. The defensive strategy focused on delay and disruption rather than direct confrontation, creating sufficient time for the federal extraction to clear potential interdiction points while minimizing casualties on either side. Throughout the engagement, Rocky performed with exceptional discipline, identifying approach vectors, alerting to flanking maneuvers, and even detecting an attempted breach through underground utility access that technical systems had missed. Mason relied completely on his partner's sensory advantages, their mutual trust enabling effective response to rapidly evolving threat patterns. The security team maintained defensive integrity for approximately 40 minutes, sufficient time, according to Eleanor's calculations, for the federal transport to reach secure airspace beyond network interception capabilities. As the attacking force coordinated for what appeared to be a final, concentrated assault, James issued withdrawal orders through their communication system. Primary objective achieved: execute planned withdrawal through designated extraction routes. Rendezvous at secondary location within established timeline. Ekukusho. The extraction plan divided their remaining personnel among multiple routes, maximizing confusion for pursuing forces while ensuring no single interdiction could capture the entire security team. Mason and Rocky were assigned to accompany James through the facility's eastern evacuation route, a path that leveraged Rocky's tracking capabilities through difficult terrain where pursuers would struggle to maintain direct observation. As they executed their withdrawal, Mason observed his father's movements with professional assessment, noting the disciplined efficiency that belied his age and reported medical condition. James Hayes operated with the practiced precision of someone who had spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario, each movement purposeful and economical. Rocky led their small group through the densely wooded terrain beyond the facility, his exceptional navigation abilities and threat detection providing crucial advantages as pursuit organized behind them. The shepherd moved with confident purpose, occasionally adjusting their route to avoid detection equipment or pursuit teams identified through his sensory capabilities. Their progress continued through declining daylight into evening darkness, maintaining communication silence as they navigated toward the designated rendezvous point. Throughout the journey, Rocky remained vigilantly alert despite hours of continuous operation, his training and physical conditioning allowing sustained performance where other animals might have faltered. As they approached the rendezvous coordinates, Mason noticed his father's increasing fatigue, subtle indicators that might have escaped observation by someone less attuned to physical performance metrics. The strain of extended tactical movement was clearly taking toll on James's system, likely exacerbated by his underlying medical condition. Rocky detected the rendezvous location before either man could visually confirm it, his behavior shifting to indicate recognition of a pre-established position. The site proved to be a small cabin nestled against rocky terrain, its position providing excellent defensive observation while remaining difficult to approach undetected. Inside, they found Eleanor already established monitoring communications equipment that indicated successful arrival of other team members at alternate locations. The federal extraction had proceeded without interception with Emily Noah, and the evidence now secured in protected custody beyond network reach. Agent Winters confirms initial arrests in 6 coastal jurisdictions. Eleanor reported as they secured their position, including major financial and political figures connected to harbor network operations. Benjamin is providing direct testimony that corroborates Emily's evidence. The dismantling has begun, the confirmation of their operational success, The culmination of decades of investigation and sacrifice should have provided immediate satisfaction. Instead, Mason observed his father's complex reaction, momentary relief quickly replaced by contemplative assessment of continuing vulnerabilities and necessary follow-through actions. The network's redundancy protocols will activate immediately. James noted his analytical focus undiminished despite physical exhaustion. Secondary leadership already assuming control of remaining assets. Financial resources being shifted through offshore protection mechanisms, compromised officials beginning deniability procedures. Normative true, Eleanor acknowledged. But the evidence framework Emily constructed anticipated these responses. Federal prosecutors have supporting documentation to counter each contingency protocol. The network cannot rebuild from this exposure. As the tactical discussion continued, Rocky settled near the cabin's small heating source. His vigilance temporarily reduced now that they had reached relative security. Mason joined his partner providing water and the compressed protein supplements designed for working dogs during extended operations. The shepherd accepted these provisions with characteristic discipline, maintaining operational readiness despite the opportunity for rest. James eventually joined them, his movements revealing the physical toll of their escape more clearly now that immediate danger had passed. He settled carefully onto a bench near Rocky, watching the shepherd with evident appreciation. "He's exceptional," James commented quietly. "His performance today would impress even the most demanding tactical handlers. The bond between you is something special." Mason nodded agreement, continuing his methodical care of his partner with practiced movements that reflected their years together. Rocky's capabilities extend beyond his training parameters. He adapts to novel situations with an intelligence that sometimes seems almost human. Catherine would say that's the true value of working with another species. James observed not imposing human expectations on animal cognition, but creating space for different forms of intelligence to complement each other. He smiled slightly at some private memory. She volunteered with search and rescue dogs during college, said she learned more about effective communication from them than from any human instructor. The conversation paused as Eleanor approached with update reports from federal operations across multiple jurisdictions. The systematic dismantling of harbor network infrastructure was proceeding according to design arrest warrants executed against key personnel, financial assets secured against dispersal attempts, evidence chains established with appropriate legal protocols. Benjamin has been formally placed in protective custody, Eleanor reported with evident satisfaction. His testimony is already providing contextual framework that strengthens the prosecution position. The organizational structure is collapsing exactly as we projected. As operational updates continued throughout the evening, Mason observed his father's increasing physical strain, despite James's efforts to maintain professional focus. The combined effects of their tactical escape and his underlying medical condition were creating visible impact that could not be disguised from experienced observation. "You need rest," Mason said finally, medical concern overriding tactical considerations. "Eleanor and I can maintain operational monitoring. Rocky will provide security alert if necessary." James began to object, but reconsidered as Rocky raised his head in apparent agreement with Mason's assessment. Perhaps a brief recovery period would be tactically advantageous. He conceded with the faintest smile at the shepherd's seeming intervention. Once James had retired to the cabin's small sleeping area, Eleanor joined Mason beside Rocky, her professional demeanor softening slightly as they shared quiet observation of the night forest through the cabin's narrow windows. He pushed himself beyond medical recommendations to be operationally present today. She informed Mason directly. His oncologist advised against any physical exertion weeks ago. James ignored those limitations to ensure he could participate in the culmination of Catherine's work. The confirmation of his father's compromised health created complex emotional response for Mason. Recognition of James Hayes's determination to complete his life's mission, regardless of personal cost, alongside anger that their reconnection might be even more fleeting than he had imagined. "How long?" Mason asked, simply the question encompassing multiple layers of meaning. Without aggressive intervention, weeks rather than months, Eleanor replied with clinical precision, "With appropriate medical support, perhaps longer though, with significantly diminished quality of life. He's been prioritizing functional capacity over comfort, reducing pain management to maintain cognitive clarity during critical operational phases." Rocky shifted positions, slightly moving to press against Mason's leg in the supportive gesture he often offered during moments of emotional distress. The shepherd's intuitive recognition of his handler's internal state provided grounding presence amid the disorienting information about his father's condition. He wanted to see this completed. Eleanor continued after appropriate pause, to fulfill the promise he made to Catherine 25 years ago that her work would eventually expose the truth that her death would not represent the network's final victory. And he wanted to see you to know you had become the person she believed you could be even without her direct influence. The simple articulation of his father's priorities provided framework for Mason to process the conflicting emotions surrounding James Hayes' reappearance in his life. Beyond the operational necessity and tactical considerations lay fundamental human longing, a father's desire to know his son, to confirm his wife's faith in their child's potential to complete the life purpose that had sustained him through decades of isolation and sacrifice. Rocky's continued presence against Mason's leg offered silent support as he absorbed these realizations. The shepherd's unwavering loyalty and intuitive understanding had become his most consistent relationship, the partnership that had sustained him through professional challenges and personal uncertainty. Now that same steadfast presence provided foundation as he navigated the complex emotional terrain of rediscovering and potentially losing his father within the same compressed time frame. "What happens now?" Mason asked finally, the question encompassing both immediate operational concerns and larger life directions. Operationally, federal prosecution proceeds against network leadership, while remaining cells are identified and contained. Eleanor outlined with practiced efficiency. Emily and Noah enter witness protection until all significant threat vectors are neutralized. Benjamin likely follows similar protocol, though with continued consulting role in prosecution strategy. She paused, shifting from tactical assessment to more personal considerations. For James, medical decisions regarding treatment options versus quality of life priorities. His operational purpose has sustained him beyond medical expectations, but with that objective now achieved, the unspoken implication hung between them. James Hayes had remained alive through determination to complete Catherine's work and reconnect with their son. With those objectives accomplished, his resistance to advancing illness might diminish accordingly. And Mason asked, recognizing that Eleanor Hayes represented yet another previously unknown aspect of his family history. "What happens to my mother's sister when this is finished?" The question appeared to surprise Eleanor slightly, as if her own future had been subordinated to operational considerations for so long that personal planning had become foreign concept. "I have certain intelligence consulting arrangements that will continue." She reflected professional obligations with sufficient security clearance to remain safely beyond network influence. She studied Mason thoughtfully before adding, "And perhaps some overdue family reconnection if you're amenable. Catherine would have wanted us to know each other beyond this operational context." Rocky stirred his attention, shifting toward the cabin door, seconds before a communications alert indicated incoming secured transmission. Eleanor moved immediately to receive the update, while Mason maintained security observation, the partnership between human and canine functioning with practiced coordination. Despite their exhaustion, the transmission contained confirmation of successful federal operation across multiple jurisdictions. The harbor network's structure collapsing under coordinated law enforcement pressure, exactly as their strategic planning had projected. Agent Winters had personally overseen Emily and Noah's transition to secured federal protection, with the evidence package already generating additional arrest warrants as analysis proceeded. "It's done," Eleanor stated simply upon completing review of the transmission. "Catherine's work is finished. You're not one. He keyed relevance." The statement carried weight beyond its tactical significance, representing culmination of 25 years of determined investigation and personal sacrifice by multiple individuals connected through shared purpose. Mason felt the historic importance of the moment even as operational focus maintained priority in their current security situation. Rocky suddenly raised his head alertly, attention fixing on the cabin's rear entrance with recognition rather than alarm. Seconds later, the secure communication system activated with approach notification. Davis and Martinez had reached their position, completing their team's assembly at the designated rendezvous point. Their arrival brought additional confirmation of the network's systematic dismantling across operational jurisdictions. Davis provided detailed assessment of law enforcement response throughout the region, while Martinez offered specific intelligence regarding Pinewood Harbor's departmental chaos following leadership arrests and federal intervention. The department will require complete restructuring, Martinez explained as they updated operational maps with current intelligence. Federal oversight until corruption vectors are fully identified and removed legitimate officers being evaluated for retention under new command structure. The discussion continued with professional focus, each team member contributing specialized knowledge to comprehensive assessment of current situation and projected developments. Throughout this operational review, Rocky maintained vigilant security posture, his training and instincts providing additional protection layer, despite the apparent success of their mission. Later, as team members settled into recovery rotation with designated security watches, Mason found himself alone with Rocky in the cabin's main room, his assigned observation period coinciding with the shepherd's natural alertness cycle. James emerged from the sleeping area during this quiet interval, moving carefully but with determined purpose to join his son near the cabin's main window. "I couldn't sleep," he explained, simply settling into a chair position to observe both the exterior approach and Rocky's relaxed but attentive posture. Too many thoughts requiring processing after 25 years of singular focus. "Son," Mason nodded, understanding recognition of similar tendency within himself to process complex situations through extended wakefulness, rather than surrendering to sleep while questions remained unresolved. Rocky approached James with careful assessment, before settling between father and son, his position connecting them physically an apparent reflection of the relationship developing between them. Catherine would appreciate this moment. James observed quietly, his hand extending to gently stroke Rocky's head. Her work completed, her son grown into a man of principle and a good dog connecting generations. She believed the simplest elements often carried the most profound significance. The observation created space for companionable silence, both men watching the night forest through the cabin window, while Rocky maintained his position between them, the three forming tableau of connection that transcended their brief conscious association. "What happens when we leave this cabin?" Mason asked, eventually, the question encompassing multiple layers of potential meaning. James considered this with appropriate seriousness. "Operationally, we transition to federal protective protocols until remaining network elements are fully contained. You and Rocky would receive appropriate security designation, given your involvement and value as potential targets during network dissolution phase." He paused, shifting from tactical assessment to more personal consideration. "Beyond operational parameters, that depends entirely on what you want. Mason, I've lived 25 years with consequences of choices made to protect you. I won't presume to impose my presence in your life now without your explicit permission." Rocky shifted slightly, maintaining physical contact with both men while adjusting his position for more comfortable rest. The shepherd's simple presence created grounding influence amid the complexity of human relationship being navigated around him. "I'd like to know you," Mason said, finally, the statement emerging with surprising clarity after days of emotional turmoil. "Not just as operational partner or tactical resource, but as my father, whatever time remains available." The simple acknowledgement created visible impact for James Hayes' emotion, briefly overcoming the disciplined composure that had characterized his operational presence. Rocky sensed this shift, immediately pressing closer, to James, in apparent offer of support similar to what he regularly provided Mason during emotional distress. "I'd like that very much," James replied when he had regained composure. "To know you beyond the reports and distant observations that have sustained me these years. To hear about your life, your choices, your partnership with this remarkable animal." As Dawn approached outside the cabin window, father and son began the process of reconnection, sharing stories of their separate lives. While Rocky maintained his position between them, the shepherd's steady presence